The first gunshot nearly clipped Eleanor Morgan's ear as she ducked behind the weathered oak counter of her small apothecary shop. It was 1876 in the dusty town of Willow Creek, Wyoming Territory, a place where law was more suggestion than rule, and today that bitter truth was playing out in her own establishment. "I don't want no trouble with a woman," the gruff voice called out. "Just hand over your earnings and medicines, and nobody gets hurt." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. At 26, she'd built this modest business from nothing after her parents passed, and she wasn't about to surrender it to some low-life desperado. Her fingers curled around the small derringer she kept beneath the counter. "Sir," she replied, voice steadier than her shaking hands, "there are other establishments in town with far more valuable goods. I suggest you try your luck elsewhere." A harsh laugh echoed through the shop. "A woman with spirit. Ain't that something?" The floorboards creaked as the outlaw took another step forward. Eleanor closed her eyes, said a silent prayer, and prepared to defend the only thing she had left in this world. The bell above the door jingled. "I'd reconsider your current endeavor if I were you," came a deep, calm voice that Eleanor didn't recognize. The outlaw spun around. "Who the hell are you?" "Just a man who doesn't much care for those who threaten defenseless women." Eleanor risked peering over the counter. A tall figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the afternoon sun. The stranger's hand hovered near his holster. "This ain't your business, mister," the robber snarled. "I'm making it my business." What happened next unfolded so quickly that Eleanor could hardly process it. The robber went for his gun, but the stranger was faster, impossibly faster. A single shot rang out, and the would-be thief crumpled to the floor, clutching his shoulder. "You shot me," he wailed. "Be grateful I didn't aim for your heart," the stranger said, stepping fully into the shop. "Now get up. The sheriff's office is just down the street." As the light fell across his face, Eleanor got her first good look at her savior. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and a strong jawline partially obscured by several days' worth of stubble. His eyes were a striking blue beneath the brim of a worn leather hat, and though his clothes were trail-dusted, they were of good quality. "You all right, madam?" he asked, not taking his eyes off the wounded outlaw. "Yes. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. Hunter Hayes." Eleanor nodded, slowly rising from behind the counter. "Eleanor Morgan. I'm in your debt, Mr. Hayes." After marching the robber to the sheriff's office and giving their statements, Hunter escorted Eleanor back to her shop. The evening sun cast long shadows down Willow Creek's main street. "That's quite a skill with a pistol," Eleanor remarked, still shaken but determined not to show it. Hunter shrugged. "Necessary out here." "You run that shop alone?" "I do." She hesitated before adding, "My parents died of typhoid 3 years ago. The apothecary was my father's. I apprenticed with him since I was a girl." "A lady doctor, then?" "Not exactly. I mix remedies, deliver babies sometimes, tend to minor ailments. Nothing that requires actual medical school." She gave a small, self-deprecating smile. "Which is fortunate, as they don't much care for women in those institutions." They reached the shop door, and Eleanor turned to face him properly. "Will you be staying in Willow Creek long, Mr. Hayes?" "Call me Hunter, please." He removed his hat, revealing thick, dark hair. "And I'm not sure. I've been hired to help the Callahan Ranch with their spring roundup. Might be a few weeks, might be longer." Eleanor nodded, studying him. There was something in his eyes, a sadness, perhaps, or simply the weariness of a man who'd seen too much of the harsh realities of the frontier. "Well, Hunter, my door is always open should you need any remedies or conversation that doesn't revolve around cattle." His smile transformed his face, softening the hard edges. "I might just take you up on that, Miss Morgan." "Eleanor," she corrected, surprising herself with her boldness. "Eleanor," he repeated, and something in the way her name rolled off his tongue made her cheeks flush. As Hunter tipped his hat and strode away, Eleanor couldn't explain the flutter in her stomach. She was being silly, she told herself. Handsome cowboys passed through Willow Creek all the time. But none had saved her life before, and none had looked at her quite the way Hunter Hayes did. The next morning, Eleanor was arranging bottles of tinctures when the shop bell jingled. She turned, surprised to find Hunter standing awkwardly in the doorway, hat in hand. "Good morning," she greeted, unable to keep the smile from her face. "What brings you by so early?" He cleared his throat. "I was thrown from my horse yesterday. Nothing serious, but I've got a nasty bruise that could use some attention." Eleanor gestured to a chair. "Sit down and show me." Hunter removed his jacket and unbuttoned his shirt enough to reveal a purple contusion spreading across his left shoulder. Eleanor tried to maintain her professional composure as she examined the injury, but she couldn't help noticing the firm muscles beneath her fingertips or the way his skin warmed at her touch. "This will need arnica," she said, turning away to hide her flushed cheeks. She busied herself mixing a salve, grateful for the familiar routine. "You're good at this," Hunter observed as she applied the remedy. "I should be. I've been doing it since I was 12. She worked the salve into his skin with gentle, circular motions. "What about you? Have you always been a cowboy?" Hunter was quiet for a moment. "Not always. I was a soldier once. Fought for the Union in '65, though I was barely old enough to enlist. After that, well, a man needs work, and I'm good with horses." Eleanor sensed there was more to his story, but didn't press. "There," she said, recapping the jar of salve. "Apply this twice daily. I'll give you some to take with you." Their fingers brushed as she handed him the container, and that strange flutter returned to her stomach. "What do I owe you?" Hunter asked, rebuttoning his shirt. Eleanor waved him off. "Consider it payment for saving my life yesterday." "That's mighty generous." "It's practical. I need customers alive to buy my remedies." He laughed, a warm, rich sound that made her smile widen. "Fair enough. But I insist on some form of payment. Would you allow me to escort you to dinner at the hotel restaurant this evening?" Eleanor hesitated. She rarely socialized, preferring the company of her books and bottles to the gossip of townsfolk. But there was something about Hunter Hayes that made her want to break her routine. "I would like that," she finally replied. His smile was worth her momentary discomfort. "I'll call for you at 6 then." After he left, Eleanor found herself humming as she worked something she hadn't done in years. That evening, Eleanor spent an uncharacteristic amount of time on her appearance, finally selecting her best dress, a modest blue gown that brought out the hints of green in her hazel eyes. She pinned her chestnut hair in a simple but elegant style, allowing a few curls to frame her face. Hunter arrived precisely at 6, freshly shaven and dressed in clean clothes. His eyes widened appreciatively as she opened the door. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Eleanor blushed. "Thank you. You clean up well yourself." The hotel restaurant was the finest establishment in Willow Creek, which wasn't saying much, but the food was good and the atmosphere pleasant. They were seated at a corner table, away from the curious stares of the other diners. "So," Hunter began after they'd ordered, "how does a young woman come to run an apothecary alone in a place like this?" Eleanor toyed with her napkin. "My father was the town doctor before the war. He learned herbal remedies from my mother, who was half Cherokee. When he returned from the battlefields, he couldn't stomach practicing traditional medicine anymore, said he'd seen too much blood and suffering. So he opened the apothecary instead, combining his medical knowledge with my mother's herbal wisdom." She paused, the familiar grief washing over her. "They taught me everything they knew. When the typhoid outbreak came through, they treated everyone in town before succumbing themselves. I was the only one left to carry on their work." Hunter's hand covered hers briefly.
"I'm sorry."
"That couldn't have been easy." "Life rarely is," she replied, then forced a smile. But enough about my sad tales. What brings a cowboy like you to our little corner of Wyoming? As they ate, Hunter told her about growing up in Pennsylvania, his time in the war, and the years since spent working cattle drives throughout the West. He spoke of magnificent landscapes and terrifying storms, of campfire tales and the camaraderie of cowboys. But you never settled anywhere? Eleanor asked as they shared a slice of apple pie. Hunter's expression grew distant. Never found a reason to, I suppose. By the time he walked her back to her shop, which had living quarters above it, Eleanor felt as though she'd known Hunter Hayes for years rather than days. At her door, he took her hand and brushed his lips across her knuckles. Thank you for a lovely evening, Eleanor. She gazed up at him, momentarily lost in those blue eyes. Will I see you again? Try to keep me away, he murmured. Then, with a tip of his hat, he was gone. Over the next few weeks, Hunter became a regular visitor to the apothecary. Sometimes he brought minor injuries for her to treat a cut on his palm, a sprained wrist. Other times, he simply came to talk or to escort her to dinner. Eleanor found herself looking forward to the jingle of the bell that announced his arrival, to the way his face lit up when he saw her. One evening in late May, Hunter invited her on a picnic by the creek that gave the town its name. The day was perfect warm sunshine, a gentle breeze, wildflowers dotting the grassy banks. I brought something special, Hunter said, producing a bottle of wine from the picnic basket. From California. Thought you might enjoy a taste of somewhere different. Eleanor smiled as he poured her a glass. Are you trying to intoxicate me, Mr. Hayes? Just sharing something nice with a beautiful woman. His gaze held hers a moment too long, and Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks. They talked easily as they ate, the conversation flowing naturally between them. Hunter told her stories of the Callahan Ranch, of the ornery cattle and the young hands he was training. Eleanor shared tales of her more eccentric customers and their unusual ailments. As the sun began its descent, casting golden light across the water, Hunter grew quiet. What is it? Eleanor asked, noticing the change in his demeanor. He stared at the creek for a long moment. The Callahans have offered me a permanent position. Foreman of the entire operation. Eleanor's heart leapt, then immediately sank. That's wonderful. But you don't seem pleased. It's a good opportunity, he acknowledged. Steady work, decent pay, a chance to put down roots. But Hunter turned to face her, his expression unreadable. But I've been thinking about moving on. There's talk of good land opening up in Montana Territory. Eleanor felt as though the ground had dropped from beneath her. She'd known Hunter would leave eventually, men like him always did, but she'd allowed herself to hope. I see, she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. When would you go? That's the thing. He took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. I've been trying to decide what matters most to me. And the truth is, Eleanor, these past weeks with you have been the happiest I can remember. Her breath caught. Hunter, let me finish, he said gently. I've wandered for years, never staying anywhere long, never letting myself get attached. But with you, I find myself wanting to stay, wanting to see your face every day, wanting to build something that lasts. Eleanor couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. What I'm trying to say, very poorly, Hunter continued, is that I think I'm falling in love with you, Eleanor Morgan. And before I make any decisions about my future, I needed you to know that. A tear slipped down Eleanor's cheek. I think I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered. Hunter's face broke into a smile so radiant it nearly took her breath away. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as Eleanor's arms wound around his neck. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Hunter rested his forehead against hers. So perhaps I'll take that foreman position after all. Eleanor laughed, joy bubbling up inside her. Perhaps you should. As spring melted into summer, Eleanor and Hunter's courtship blossomed. He took the foreman position at the Callahan Ranch and rented a small house in town. Nearly every evening, they could be found walking together along Willow Creek streets or sitting on the bench outside the apothecary, talking until the stars came out. The townsfolk watched with interest, some with approval, others with envy. Eleanor had always been respected for her skills and her father's legacy, but she'd kept to herself since her parents' deaths. Hunter, with his quiet competence and obvious devotion to Eleanor, quickly earned the town's respect as well. In late June, Hunter invited Eleanor to visit the Callahan Ranch. "The wildflowers are at their peak," he explained, "and Mrs. Callahan has been asking to meet you properly." The ranch was impressive, several thousand acres of rolling grassland backed by pine-covered hills. The main house was a grand two-story structure with a wide porch, while bunkhouses and barns dotted the surrounding area. Mrs. Callahan, a plump, jovial woman in her 50s, greeted Eleanor warmly. "So, you're the young lady who's finally tamed our Hunter. I've been trying to marry him off to my nieces for months, but he wouldn't give them the time of day." "Martha," Mr. Callahan warned, but his wife merely laughed. "Oh, hush, Thomas. I'm just telling the truth." She linked her arm through Eleanor's. "Come, dear, let me show you around while the men talk business." As they toured the house, Martha chattered about her children all grown and moved away and her hopes for grandchildren. "Nothing brings joy like little ones underfoot," she sighed. "Though I suspect you know all about that, delivering so many babies." Eleanor smiled politely, but felt the familiar pang at the mention of children. It was something she'd avoided discussing with Hunter, though she knew the conversation couldn't be delayed forever. After lunch, Hunter saddled 2 horses. "I want to show you my favorite spot on the property," he told Eleanor, helping her mount a gentle mare. They rode for nearly an hour, Hunter pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about his work. Finally, they crested a hill, and Eleanor gasped. Below them stretched a valley filled with wildflowers of every color imaginable, bisected by a clear stream that glittered in the sunlight. "It's beautiful," she breathed as Hunter helped her dismount. "I knew you'd appreciate it." He spread a blanket beneath a lone oak tree that offered shade from the afternoon sun. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching clouds drift across the blue sky. Eventually, Hunter reached for something in his saddlebag. "I have something for you," he said, suddenly looking nervous. Eleanor watched curiously as he withdrew a small wooden box, intricately carved with flowers and vines. "I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment," he admitted. "And I can't think of a more perfect place than this." He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a small but brilliant diamond. "Eleanor Morgan," he said, his voice husky with emotion, "I love you more than I ever thought possible. You've given me a reason to stop wandering, a place to belong. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes. "Hunter, there's something you need to know before you ask that question." His expression grew concerned. "What is it?" Eleanor took a deep breath. "When I was 20, I fell very ill with scarlet fever," the doctor said. "He said the infection damaged my womb, that I would never be able to bear children." She looked down, unable to meet his eyes. "I should have told you sooner, but I was afraid. I know most men want a family, heirs to carry on their name, and I can't give you that." Hunter was quiet for so long that Eleanor's heart began to sink. Then his finger gently tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Eleanor," he said softly, "I'm asking to marry you, not your womb. I love you, your kindness, your intelligence, your strength. If children are meant to be part of our life, there are other ways. And if not, then having you as my wife would be more than enough happiness for one lifetime." Fresh tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks, but these were tears of joy. "Then yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you, Hunter Hayes." His smile could have outshone the sun as he slipped the ring onto her finger and sealed their engagement with a kiss that promised a lifetime of love. The wedding took place on a crisp October day, with leaves turning gold and crimson on the trees surrounding Willow Creek's small church. The entire town turned out for the occasion, Eleanor in a cream-colored dress with lace her mother had made, Hunter looking distinguished in a new black suit. Martha Callahan had insisted on hosting the reception at the ranch, and no expense was spared. Tables groaned under the weight of food, a small band played lively tunes, and lanterns were strung between trees to illuminate the festivities as night fell. "Mrs. Hayes," Hunter murmured as they shared their first dance as husband and wife. "I like the sound of that." Eleanor smiled up at him. "So do I." They made their home in Hunter's rented house at first, with plans to build their own place the following spring. Eleanor continued running the apothecary, while Hunter's reputation as a fair but firm foreman grew. The Callahans, childless themselves, began to treat Hunter almost as a son, and by extension, Eleanor as a daughter. Winter came early that year, with heavy snows blanketing the town by mid-November. The apothecary stayed busy as people sought remedies for winter ailments, and Hunter spent long hours ensuring the ranch's cattle had adequate shelter and feed. Despite the challenges of the season, Eleanor had never been happier. Each evening, she returned home to a warm house and a husband who greeted her with a kiss and genuine interest in her day. They would cook together, read by the fire, talk for hours about everything and nothing. At night, in the privacy of their bedroom, they discovered the deep physical connection that matched their emotional bond. It was during one such night in late January that Hunter noticed the small changes in his wife's body, the increased tenderness of her breasts, the slight roundness to her normally flat stomach. "Eleanor," he said cautiously, his hand resting on her abdomen, "when was your last monthly?" She frowned, calculating. "December, I think." "With everything so busy at the shop, I hardly noticed." Her eyes widened as understanding dawned. "But that's impossible." "The doctor said." "Doctors can be wrong," Hunter pointed out, trying to keep his voice level despite the hope rising in his chest. The next morning, they visited Doc Wilson, the elderly physician who had taken over medical duties in town after Eleanor's father died. After a thorough examination, the doctor sat back with a bemused expression. "Well, Miss Eleanor, it appears you're about 10 weeks along. The baby seems healthy from what I can tell." Eleanor clutched Hunter's hand, hardly daring to believe. "But how?" "I was told after the scarlet fever that I could never conceive." Doc Wilson shook his head. "Medicine isn't an exact science, my dear. Particularly when it comes to women's issues, many physicians make pronouncements based on limited understanding. What I can tell you is that you are most definitely with child, and while I'd recommend extra caution given your history, there's no reason to believe you can't carry to term." They left the doctor's office in a daze, walking through the snowy streets in silence until they reached their home. Once inside, Hunter swept Eleanor into his arms, spinning her around as laughter bubbled from both their throats. "A baby," he marveled, setting her gently on her feet. "Our baby." Eleanor pressed her hands to her stomach, still flat enough that no one would notice, but now containing the most precious secret. "It feels like a miracle." "You're the miracle," Hunter murmured, kissing her deeply. "And I fall more in love with you every day." The pregnancy progressed without major complications, though Eleanor suffered terribly from morning sickness during her second trimester. Hunter proved to be an attentive, sometimes overly cautious husband, insisting she rest frequently and hiring a young woman named Sarah to help at the apothecary. By May, Eleanor's condition was obvious to everyone in town, and the news spread quickly. Martha Callahan immediately appointed herself unofficial godmother, arriving weekly with homemade treats and hand-knitted baby clothes. As Eleanor's belly grew, so did Hunter's protectiveness. He began construction on their new home earlier than planned, a comfortable two-story house on a small parcel of land the Callahans had given them as a wedding present. It was close enough to town for Eleanor to continue her work when she felt up to it, but far enough out to provide the peace and beauty of the countryside. The nursery will have the morning sun, Hunter explained as he showed Eleanor the partially framed structure. And our bedroom connects directly to it, so we'll hear the baby right away if it cries. Eleanor smiled, touching his cheek tenderly. You've thought of everything. I want it to be perfect for you both. His hand covered hers where it rested on her swollen abdomen. You've given me more than I ever dreamed possible. As Eleanor entered her 8th month, the summer heat became nearly unbearable. She moved slowly now, her petite frame dwarfed by her pregnant belly. Doc Wilson visited regularly, always reassuring them that everything appeared normal, though the baby seemed large. You're carrying high and wide, he noted during one examination. Could be a big baby or... He pressed his hands to different areas of her abdomen, listening with his stethoscope. A slow smile spread across his weathered face. Well now, that explains it. What? Hunter asked, immediately concerned. Nothing to worry about, Doc Wilson assured him. But I believe Mrs. Hayes here is carrying twins. Eleanor gasped. Twins? Are you certain? As certain as I can be, without modern equipment. I can detect 2 distinct heartbeats, and the way you're carrying is consistent with a twin pregnancy. Hunter's face paled, then flushed with joy. 2 babies. 2 babies, the doctor confirmed. Which means, Mrs. Hayes, that you need to be even more careful these last weeks. Twins often come early, and they can be a difficult delivery. Eleanor nodded, suddenly fearful. Her own mother had nearly died giving birth to a stillborn brother when Eleanor was 10. The memory of those terrifying hours had never fully faded. Hunter must have sensed her anxiety, for he squeezed her hand reassuringly. We'll be prepared for anything. Right, Doc? Absolutely. And despite what some might think of our frontier medicine, I've delivered more sets of twins than I can count. The elderly physician patted Eleanor's hand. You focus on resting and eating well, and let us worry about the details. That night, as they lay in bed, Hunter's hand resting protectively over Eleanor's belly, he whispered, 2 little lives we created together. Can you believe it? Eleanor covered his hand with hers. Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and discover this has all been a beautiful dream. It's real, Hunter assured her, pressing a kiss to her temple. And I promise you, Eleanor Hayes, that I will protect you and our children with everything I have. As July gave way to August, the heat became even more oppressive. Eleanor was confined mostly to bed now, uncomfortable and restless. Their new house was nearly complete, but Dr. Wilson had advised against moving until after the births, concerned about Eleanor traveling even the short distance from town. On the evening of August 10th, 1877, Eleanor felt the first contraction while Hunter was reading to her from one of her favorite novels. She gasped, clutching her stomach. Eleanor. Hunter dropped the book, immediately alert. I think. She paused as the pain subsided. I think it might be starting. Hunter sprang into action, having rehearsed this moment countless times in his mind. He sent their neighbor's son for Doc Wilson, helped Eleanor into a more comfortable position, and began timing the contractions as the doctor had instructed. Doc Wilson arrived within the hour, his face grave as he examined Eleanor. The babies are coming, all right, and they're not waiting for morning. First one's already in position. The next 12 hours were the most harrowing of Hunter's life. Eleanor's labor progressed slowly, each contraction seeming to drain more of her strength. By dawn, her face was ashen, her nightgown soaked with sweat. She needs to push now, Doc Wilson announced, positioning himself at the foot of the bed. Mrs. Hayes, when the next pain comes, I need you to bear down with all your might. Eleanor nodded weakly, clutching Hunter's hand. When the contraction came, she pushed, a cry of pain escaping her lips. Good, good, the doctor encouraged. I can see the head. One more push should do it for this first one. With a tremendous effort, Eleanor pushed again, and suddenly the room was filled with a thin, indignant wail of a newborn. A girl, Doc Wilson announced, quickly cleaning the tiny infant and wrapping her in a soft blanket. And a fine-looking one at that. Hunter took his daughter with trembling hands, tears streaming down his face as he showed her to Eleanor. Look what you did, my love. She's perfect. Eleanor managed a weak smile, reaching out to touch the baby's downy head before another contraction seized her. The second birth came more quickly, but Eleanor's strength was fading fast. A boy, Doc Wilson declared as the second baby emerged with a lusty cry. Congratulations, you have one of each. But Hunter's joy turned to terror as he saw the blood pooling beneath his wife. Eleanor's eyes had closed, her breathing shallow. Doc, he said urgently, handing the baby girl to the midwife who had arrived to assist. I see it, the doctor replied grimly, already working to stem the bleeding. She's hemorrhaging. Get those babies out of here and bring me more clean towels and hot water. The next hours were a blur for Hunter as he paced outside the bedroom, the twins being cared for by the midwife in the next room. He prayed as he had never prayed before, bargaining with God to spare Eleanor's life. It was nearly noon when Doc Wilson finally emerged, looking exhausted but relieved. She'll live, he said simply. It was touch and go for a while, but the bleeding has stopped. She's very weak and will need complete rest for at least a month, but with proper care, she should make a full recovery. Hunter sagged against the wall, overcome with relief. Thank you, he whispered, clasping the doctor's hand. Thank you for saving her. She did most of the work herself, Doc Wilson replied with a tired smile. She's a fighter, your wife. Now, go see your family. Just remember she needs rest, so keep it brief. Eleanor lay pale against the pillows, her eyes closed. For a moment, Hunter feared the worst, but then her eyelids fluttered open. The babies, she whispered, her voice barely audible. They're perfect, Hunter assured her, sitting gently on the edge of the bed and taking her hand. A boy and a girl, both healthy and strong. A tear slid down Eleanor's cheek. I want to see them. Hunter nodded to the midwife, who brought the swaddled infants and carefully placed them in Eleanor's arms. Despite her weakness, Eleanor's face transformed with love as she gazed at her children. They're beautiful, she murmured. So beautiful. Just like their mother, Hunter said, his voice thick with emotion. Eleanor looked up at him, her eyes shining despite her exhaustion. What shall we call them? They had discussed names but hadn't settled on any, half believing the doctor's original prognosis that Eleanor would never bear children. Hunter studied his son's tiny face, already showing signs of his strong features. How about Henry for the boy after my father? Eleanor nodded. Henry Hayes. It's perfect. She looked down at her daughter, with her shock of dark hair and rosebud mouth. And for this little one, Hope, because she represents everything I never thought I'd have. Henry and Hope Hayes, Hunter repeated, gently touching each tiny head. Welcome to the world, little ones. You are so very loved. The weeks that followed were challenging, but filled with joy. Eleanor recovered slowly, gaining strength each day. Hunter proved to be a natural with the babies, changing diapers and walking the floor with them when they cried at night, so Eleanor could rest. By September, Doc Wilson declared Eleanor well enough to move to their new home. The house was everything they had dreamed of, spacious but cozy, with large windows that let in abundant light and views of the distant mountains. The nursery, painted a soft yellow, held 2 identical cribs that Hunter had crafted himself. A rocking chair sat in the corner, positioned to catch the morning sun, just as he had promised. As autumn painted the landscape in brilliant hues, Eleanor sat in that rocker, a baby in each arm, singing softly as Hunter leaned against the doorframe, watching his family with a heart so full it threatened to burst. "I never thought I could be this happy," Eleanor said, looking up to find her husband watching her. Hunter crossed the room and knelt beside the rocker, placing one hand on Henry's back and the other on Hope's. "Nor did I," he admitted. "For years I wandered, never finding peace. Now I know why I was looking for you for this." Eleanor leaned forward to kiss him gently. "No more wandering, then?" "No more wandering," Hunter agreed. "I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." 5 years later, the Hayes family gathered on the porch of their home to watch a summer thunderstorm roll across the plains. Henry and Hope, now active 5-year-olds with their father's blue eyes and their mother's chestnut hair, pressed their faces against the railing in excitement as lightning flashed in the distance. "Will it hit our house, Papa?" Henry asked, his expression a mixture of fear and fascination. Hunter ruffled his son's hair.
"No, son.
It's still miles away, and we have a lightning rod on the roof to protect us." "What's a lightning rod?" Hope demanded, always the more inquisitive of the twins. "It's a metal pole that draws the lightning away from the house," Eleanor explained, shifting the bundle in her arms as 2-year-old Hannah began to fuss at the sound of thunder. "Like magic," Hope pressed. "Like science," Hunter corrected with a smile. Eleanor watched her family with a heart full of gratitude. The years had brought changes. Her apothecary had expanded to include a proper medical practice after she completed correspondence courses in nursing, and Hunter now managed his own small ranch adjacent to the Callahan property. But the greatest changes were the 3 children who had defied all medical predictions. After the twins, Eleanor had assumed her miracle was complete. Then, 3 years later, Hannah had arrived, another perfect, healthy baby to join their family. Doc Wilson had simply shaken his head in amazement, declaring it further proof that medicine still had much to learn about the human body. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Hayes?" Hunter asked, noticing her thoughtful expression as he sat beside her on the porch swing. Eleanor smiled, leaning against his solid warmth. "About how completely wrong that doctor in Cheyenne was, and how perfectly right my life turned out to be." Hunter pressed a kiss to her temple, then to Hannah's forehead. "I'd say we proved him wrong 3 times over. And counting," Eleanor added with a meaningful look. Hunter's eyes widened. "Are you saying?" She nodded, a secret smile playing at her lips. "Doc Wilson confirmed it yesterday. Due in February." Hunter let out a whoop that startled Hannah and drew the twins' attention from the storm. "Your mama," he announced, gathering all 3 children close, "is the most remarkable woman in all of Wyoming territory." "Why, Papa?" Hope asked, climbing onto his lap. "Because she makes the impossible possible," Hunter replied, meeting Eleanor's eyes over their children's heads. "And she makes every day an adventure worth living." As the storm moved closer, the family retreated inside. Later, with the children tucked safely in bed and the rain drumming steadily on the roof, Hunter held Eleanor close beneath the quilts, his hand resting protectively over her still, flat stomach. "For children," he marveled. "When we met, you believed you'd have none. When we met, I believed a lot of things that turned out to be wrong," Eleanor replied, tracing the line of his jaw with her fingertips. "I thought I'd always be alone. I thought my heart was content with my books and my remedies. I thought my future was set in stone. And now I know that life is full of unexpected blessings. That love can heal wounds we didn't even know we had. That family isn't defined by blood alone, but by the bonds we choose to create." She kissed him softly. "And that sometimes the most beautiful journeys begin when a handsome cowboy walks into an apothecary shop and saves a stubborn woman from a robber." Hunter laughed, pulling her closer. "Best decision I ever made, walking into that shop." Best decision I ever made, letting you in, Eleanor countered. Outside, the storm gradually moved on, leaving behind the fresh, clean scent of rain-washed earth. Inside, sheltered in each other's arms, Eleanor and Hunter Hayes drifted to sleep, secure in the knowledge that whatever the future held, they would face it together with love, with courage, and with the family they had created against all odds. And in the years that followed, whenever anyone in Willow Creek remarked on the Hayes children eventually numbering 5 with the arrival of little Harrison the following February, Eleanor would smile and say that some miracles came with explanations, while others simply came with cowboys who refused to believe in limitations. For Hunter Hayes had done more than make her a mother. He had made her believe in possibilities, in second chances, in the healing power of love. And that, Eleanor knew, was the greatest miracle of all.